Hey baby girl. So this is my friend Kiana, and I will be explaining how I do a full coverage soft glam beat. So first, I'm just combing the brows with a disposable spoolie, getting the hairs all in the same direction. Now I am filling in her brows with a Jordana pencil in dark brown. Her brows are already done, so I'm really just following the natural shape of her brows, filling them in a bit at the arch, and using a light hand at the head of the brows to mimic hair strokes. And this is what the brows look like just filled in. Now I'm going to clean them up using a flat concealer brush and a concealer shade a few shades lighter than her skin tone. One of the reasons I do brows first is because I use this time to test out the concealer shade I'm going to use to highlight her face. This shade I liked, so I will use it to highlight her face as well. And that shade is the MAC Studio Fix Concealer in NC40. And now I'm just blending out that concealer back into her skin so you don't see any lines. And this is what the brows look like all filled in and cleaned up. Moving on to the skin. I do prefer to do any concealing or color correcting first so I don't have to use so much foundation. The only concealing she needs is covering dark marks, and I'm using a concealer shade that's actually the color of her face to do so. That shade is the LA Girl Concealer in Almond. I'm using an e.l.f. Flawless concealer brush to apply it, and a Real Techniques buffing brush to blend it in. If the brush picked up too much product or disrupted the concealer at all, I'll just reapply and use my fingers to blend to keep the coverage. And here is what her face looks like with just her dark marks concealed. Kiana did use her own moisturizer to prep her face before I got started. However, when I was concealing her face, it was still a bit too dry for my liking, so I just sprayed some rose water to get some hydration onto her face before moving on to foundation. And now, foundation. So when choosing a foundation shade, I always use the chest to match. A lot of the time, people are different colors when comparing their face, neck, and chest. That doesn't really apply to Kiana, but when you're looking straight on at someone, you see their face and their chest, and I want those two colors to be the same. I started off with Maybelline Fit Me in Warm Sun and added a little bit of spicy brown to warm it up. I'm using that same Real Techniques buffing brush to apply and blend out the product. You've seen me use either a buffing brush or a blending sponge or sometimes both. In this case, I'm using a buffing brush because sponges tend to pick up products, and I don't want any of that concealer I use under the foundation to be disrupted. And I'm just going to keep blending until everything looks seamless, and don't forget to take it down to the neck. And here is what her face looks like after foundation. When she leans her head back, you can see that her face, neck, and chest are all matching. However, the one solid tone is making her appear a bit flat, so it's time to add some dimension with highlighting and bronzing. First, I'm going to highlight. I'm using the same shade I used to conceal her brows, the MAC Studio Fix Concealer in NC40. I used a flat concealer brush from MAC to apply and an e.l.f. Flawless concealer brush to blend it back into her foundation. And I'm going to highlight wherever light naturally hits her face. That would be her forehead, the bridge of her nose, and a bit on her chin as well. Now it's time to set the concealer. I'm using that same Flawless concealer brush to buff out any under eye creasing beforehand. Then using a Real Techniques contour brush to apply some Laura Mercier translucent powder. Kiana has dry skin, not oily, so I'm not baking here. I'm literally applying just enough to lock in that concealer I used to highlight her face. Then using a big fluffy powder brush to lightly brush off any extra powder. And here is what she looks like all nice and highlighted. Now it's time to warm her up with some bronzing. I'm using the MAC Studio Fix powder in NW45. I'm using an e.l.f. highlight brush to apply and an e.l.f. Flawless Face brush to blend it in. The same way I use the Real Techniques buffing brush to blend in all of my wet products, I like to use the powder brush to blend in all of my dry products. And I'm applying it on the hollows of her cheeks and around the perimeter of her face. I'm starting off very lightly and working my way up until I get the warmth that I'm going for. Here you can see that adding some warmth helped with the contrast of that bright under eye color. However, the dimension in her nose has been lost, so let's bring that back. Using that same bronzer color, I'm using a pencil brush to apply it and an eyeshadow blending brush to blend it out. And just because I'm trying to keep this look natural, I'm using that same powder brush I've been using to further blur out those lines of bronzer on her nose. Then using the same brush I used to apply her setting powder to blend it out to the sides of her nose. That way, there's a smooth transition from the contour to the highlight. And I do want to add a little color to the face. I'm using Black Radiance Big Blush in Toasted Almond. I just really like that color for natural looks. I'm using the same brush I used to apply her bronzer. I like to contour with blush, so I want this color to blend back into her bronzer. Then, of course, using the powder brush to blend it out. And now for everyone's favorite part, highlighter. I originally used an iridescent color from Wet n Wild that I used the last time I did her face. However, she was a lot lighter then, and it wasn't giving me the glow that I wanted. So I went with my old reliable MAC Gold Deposit over top. Again, using that same brush I used to apply her bronzer because I want the glow to blend back into her bronzer, and using that same powder brush to blend it out. I really hate seeing just like a streak of highlighter on someone's face, you know? Here I'm just adding some highlighter to the bridge and tip of her nose just because that's mad cute to me. And now that my base is all complete, I'm going to set it with some MAC Fix Plus. Setting spray does a good job at settling all of the products together, making the makeup look more skin-like, taking away any extra powderiness, and it adds some glow to the highlighter. You can definitely tell that this is her favorite part. So far, everything looks good. Everything looks nice and blended. Her face looks hydrated and glowy, and it still looks pretty natural. Now I have to quickly move on to her eyes. First, I'm just priming the lids. You can use any light or white color concealer to do this. In my opinion, eyeshadow primers are scams, and I used to be faithful to that Urban Decay primer potion stuff. But seriously, just use a light concealer to make the color show up better, and I personally never had a problem with creasing by doing this. And just make sure you blend that out too. Blend everything out. I'm actually getting her ready to film a skit. Her character was like a social worker or something, so I couldn't really go too crazy on the eyes, but I did a neutral look on her last time and wanted to change it up at least a little bit. So I did my go-to work look on her, which is just using a blush, bronzer, and highlighter on the eyes. I went for a brighter blush, the Black Radiance Warm Berry all over the lids. her bronzer color on the outer V to give her eyes some dimension, and the gold deposit on the brow bone. Even if you think you can't do eyeshadow, I swear you can do that. I actually plan to go over some quick and easy eye looks in a future video. Now I'm just using a brown pencil to line her lower waterline. The pencil was properly sanitized prior to application. I didn't know what lighting setup she'd be in later and didn't want her eyes to get lost, so this prevents that. I'm adding the same pink and brown colors on her lids to her lower lash line. I actually really love that she did this. It is a little hard for some people to look up so I can blend under their eyes, but I'll definitely start having them do this because it made it so much easier for the both of us. Here I'm just adding some black eyeliner from Kat Von D. This felt tip liner was also properly sanitized prior to application. And this is really just to accentuate the shape of her eyes. And you can see that difference here. She applied her own mascara off camera and came back so I can do her lips. So the lips were real simple. Sorry, I don't know the name of this gloss. It came in a set that I got from a mall kiosk and there's no brand on it. But the liner is from Ulta. I do lip liner last unless I'm using it as a base color. I get the lines pretty straight with lip gloss or lipstick, so I'm just using it to fix anywhere it wasn't. I know it's low-key weird, but it works out. And now we're all done. A monochromatic soft beat glam for Miss Kiana. I am very happy with how this came out, and as you can see, she likes it too. She likes her makeup real natural, and I be wanting to beat the hell out of her face. So this is like our happy medium. And I love that she be getting all up in the camera so y'all can appreciate that skin work and how her contour moves with the lighting. The BabyGirlBeat is all about looking good at any angle and any lighting. And most importantly, it's about feeling yourself. Thanks for watching, baby girl. See you in my next video.